Hey patrons, Nando here. First of all, just want to say thank you so much again for continuing to support the channel. You guys are the best. You have no idea how much it helps just to, keep the lights on. You're awesome. Thank you. Second, and the reason I'm recording this, what you're about to watch is part one of what'll end up being a 3-part series where I rewrite Marvel Netflix's The Defenders. I think it's awesome. I've been working on writing it for a while. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy it, whether you've seen The Defenders or not. Problem is, I'm going to record an intro for that video, but I don't have a piece of equipment that I need yet, so it's probably going to take another day or two. But, I wanted to put the video on Patreon as early as possible, and I said that I would do it on Tuesday. So I wanted to say all the things that are going to be in the introduction. It's going to be super similar to the one that goes live. The one that goes live is just going to, look and sound better. But basically, Marvel Netflix's The Defenders was a, big disappointment. It was kind of like Justice League, where it wasn't completely terrible. It just didn't work and wasn't memorable at all. And I think was very responsible for sinking the Marvel Netflix thing. And I wanted to do a rewrite of the series, but a lot of people, A, just didn't see the series at all, or B, saw it and forgot about it because, like I said, super forgettable. So in the first video of this 3-part series, I'm not going to talk about the rewrite, right? To move forward, I think we have to look backwards. I'm just going to talk about what I think did not work about The Defenders. Talk about some of the issues and, give ideas for how I'm going to address them. And I'm going to talk about what the actual change to the series would be in like the big picture. But the details and kind of walking you through what each episode is going to look like, that's going to be videos 2 and 3. So with that being said, here's the video. Thank you guys so much. And Marvel Netflix's The Defenders was, at least for me, a huge, big bag of disappointment. I don't know anyone who watched it and considered it the slam dunk that the original Avengers was when it was released in 2012. And if you've seen the show, I don't need to explain why. Fight choreography was pretty uninteresting compared to Daredevil, which years before had set the high bar for TV action scenes. Action was also pretty difficult to see. The pacing felt uneven. And besides the issues Danny Rand brings to the series by just being the Danny Rand from Iron Fist, although to be fair to Defenders, at least in this series, characters we like get to take him down a peg and call him
a thundering dumbass.
That's a good move. But besides Danny, the clear biggest issue with The Defenders was the Hand. In case you're not familiar, the Hand was introduced in the back half of Season 2 of Daredevil. It is highly implied that Nobu, one of Kingpin's cohorts from Season 1 of Daredevil, was part of the Hand, although it wasn't confirmed until Season 2. It also turned out that Madame Gao from Season 1 of Daredevil was also a member of the Hand, even though the running theory through Daredevil Season 1 was that she was a character called Crane Mother, mostly because she really seemed like she was Crane Mother. And then, in the first season of Iron Fist, we were introduced to more members of the Hand, besides confirmation that Gao was one of the leaders of the Hand, or as they are known, and I swear this is what they call themselves if you haven't seen the show, buckle up, the Fingers. We also met a character named Bakuto, who I absolutely hate, and not only was he leading a Hand-sponsored recruitment center, whatever he was doing seemed to be at odds with Gao and her Hand activities since he kidnapped her. So right off the bat, problems. The Hand was a part of the worst 2 non-Diamondback aspects of Marvel Netflix Phase 1. They hadn't produced any extremely compelling characters or any fun fight scenes. And on top of that, they don't seem to have any consistent purpose. It just felt like whoever was writing any individual show at that time was able to decide what the Hand was, regardless of whether that lined up with the previously established Hand. This all came to a head in The Defenders, where the Hand was the sole antagonist. It was revealed that there were 3 other Fingers of the Hand that didn't get along and kinda did their own thing, besides Madame Gao, who was established as the magical leader of a New York City heroin enterprise, and Bakuto, the remarkably incompetent magical leader of a New York City's sleepaway camp. There was also Murakami, whose entire character amounted to he speaks Japanese and he has a sword. Sawande, an African warlord or something, who cares? And they were led by Alexandra, a rich lady who gave a couple of speeches and then spent all of the Hand's black goo clue on resurrecting the character that a low-level hand boss was able to kill 3 shows ago. And oh yeah, the hand was after black goo that granted them temporary immortality. The goo was made of ground-up dragon bones that were, and I swear, this is the real plot of this show, the dragon bones were buried far underneath New York City, and if removed, New York City would collapse into an evil dragon-shaped sinkhole. I think. It wasn't necessarily unclear, but it was so nonsensical that my brain has trouble comprehending it, the same way I have trouble understanding the 4th dimension. Honestly, everything about the hand was disappointing, and people have talked about this before. Patrick Willems has a great video called Why is the Hand So Boring, where he goes through the comic history of the hand and relates that to why they don't work in the Netflix shows and Defenders specifically. So what can we learn from the hand? What were they lacking? And how can we address that with a new villain? Well, I think I've boiled that down to 3 things that I've assembled into a numbered list. We'll figure out what those are, and then we'll go forward and get a villain or villain group that can address all of those shortcomings. Numbered list thing number 1. Good antagonists should be physically threatening. I don't think this is all that complicated. Most of them are. I'd say this is the one that most movies get right. If anything, a lot of the times they go overboard on this. But to create tension, it should be believable that at some point your antagonist can kill your protagonist. Take Frank Castle, the Punisher from season 2 of Daredevil. He wasn't the villain, but he was definitely an antagonist for a while. He was completely capable of killing Matt. Frank didn't seem to want to, but if he had to, he could. And if Matt got into a fight with Frank, it would be tense because we wouldn't know how that fight was going to go. But then you think about that in terms of the hand. Not only have 2 main characters completely destroyed the hand in their own series, Matt in Daredevil season 2 beat up a ton of ninjas, and in season 1 he lit one of their field generals on fire. And then Danny in the first season of Iron Fist also beat a ton of hand members and apparently killed, but I guess didn't kill, but pretty much killed Bakudo, one of the 5 fingers of the hand. So right off the bat, we have 2 characters that are pretty capable of fighting the hand. On top of that, we've got Jessica Jones, who has super strength and is somewhat invulnerable. She spends most of the fight scenes in this movie just tossing hand ninjas around. Doesn't seem to be in much danger. And then there's the worst offender, Luke Cage, a bulletproof, indestructible guy who you could reasonably assume you could put in a room with every single member of the hand, and as long as there was no time limit, he could kill all of them because they don't have any method for stopping him. The one member of the team that potentially could is Sawande, who has some sort of pressure point based martial art that is set up in a way that makes it seem like he's going to be Luke Cage's big problem, and he's going to be able to neutralize Luke Cage through the series. And in the fight at the Chinese restaurant, Sawande uses this pressure point technique to knock out Luke Cage, and Luke Cage is captured by Sawande and his faction of the hand. But then, off screen, Luke Cage escapes, defeats all of Sawande's goons, defeats Sawande, and then brings him to the Defender's hideout, where his head is promptly cut off by Stick. So none of the villains in this series are really that threatening. We, as an audience, have no indication that our heroes are in any real danger, especially since these are just ninjas. Like, some of them seem a little stronger than usual, supplemented by magic or chi or energy or something. But like, you get the feeling that if at the end of this, Frank Castle just rolled up holding that minigun that is teased in all of the promotion for these shows and never appears, I didn't finish Punisher season 2, he could just kill all of them, kind of like he does at the end of Daredevil season 2, so who cares? So we need some antagonists that are physical threats to our heroes for some reason. Next, number 2 on my numbered list, we need an antagonist that can facilitate interesting action scenes. This is also kind of a no-brainer, and a lot of movies get this right, although otherwise quality movies like Black Panther and Wonder Woman both end with action sequences that aren't bad, but I guess come off as a little underwhelming. And for different reasons. In Black Panther, it's just 2 guys bouncing around, scratching each other with essentially identical Panther suits. And in Wonder Woman, it's just Ares throwing tanks and lightning and whatever at Diana until she kills him. There's not a lot of creativity in those action sequences. And it doesn't just have to be that the way that your antagonist fights is fun to watch. The antagonist just needs to facilitate interesting action sequences. Think about Kilgrave in Jessica Jones. He's not a physical match for Jessica Jones, but he can mind control characters that that would be a physical match for Jessica Jones, like the Luke Cage action sequence. Or he can create scenarios that turn into interesting action sequences. Compare that with the Hand. Some have different weapons than others, but almost every fight is the 4 defenders versus waves of goons, like a beat-em-up arcade game. Goons show up, the hero punches them or throws them into a wall or something, they fall down, another goon shows up. It's not very fun to watch, and it especially highlights one of the other big problems with the defenders: all of the heroes punch. Luke Cage takes a lot of hits and punches, Jessica Jones is kind of a blunt instrument just tossing guys into walls, and Iron Fist and Daredevil are essentially the same guy. So in an action sequence like this one at the end of the series, it's really hard to tell who's who. They're all doing more or less the same thing, and it gets boring. So we need villains that can create interesting action sequences. And finally, number 3 on my numbered list, and most importantly, and the thing that defenders got, I would say, most wrong, there needs to be some sort of ideological difference between your heroes and your villains. Just something that sets them apart, some clear philosophy that the villains hold and the heroes oppose. And it doesn't have to be as explicit as like The Dark Knight, where the heroes are constantly talking about their philosophies and saying, my philosophy is that the people in Gotham are good, and your philosophy is that they are bad, and your philosophy is about chaos, and mine is about justice. That doesn't need to happen as explicitly, although, like in season 1 of Daredevil, you can have characters like Fisk and Matt talking about what they believe, how that makes them similar, and how that makes them different. They both want to protect the city, but Matt believes in punishing criminals and not killing people, and Fisk believes that sometimes you have to get your hands dirty and cut off a guy's head with a car door. And this is where the Hand really loses it, because season to season, the Hand does not seem to have any consistent ideology, no belief system, no real consistent goals. The only indication that they're even after all these dragon bones is that at one point we see a big hole. It's not like the characters in season 2 of Daredevil are constantly talking about how are we going to get to these dragon bones. It seems like something that's set up pretty late in the game. And because these different factions of the Hand don't get along, it's impossible to figure out what they even want. What makes them similar besides the fact that the 5 of them left Kunlun at the same time. And the 5 of them all want to be immortal. And they're all okay with killing people. But since we don't know what the Hand wants, because the Hand doesn't seem to know what the Hand wants, we can't contrast that with what our heroes want to reveal things about our heroes and the conflict itself. So those are my 3 things. I want believable danger, creative action sequences, and ideological conflict. Those aren't all of the things that an antagonist has to facilitate. There's plenty of others, but I think those are the 3 areas where the Hand fails the most. So to address that, we would need a villain or group of villains that are dangerous for some reason, maybe because of some magical, I don't know, superpowers or weapons or something. And ideally it would be something that our heroes have not faced yet and beaten. It would be a new thing, a new danger where they have to solve new problems. And with those problems, you would want something that would facilitate creative action sequences. So it wouldn't just be problems that you could punch your way out of. Heroes would need to work together in different ways. And to do that, you would just need to not have waves of identical ninjas. Give your villains some personality, define what they can do, what makes them dangerous, and go from there. This one's not all that tricky. However, it would help if your villains were different in interesting ways from each other. And then finally, some sort of ideological difference, which means our heroes and villains have to be the same, and we have to nail down what the villains believe, what they care about, what their goal is, how our heroes get in the way of our villains achieving that goal, so that the conflict between the two is interesting and natural. And I don't know, since there's 4 defenders in Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist, it'd probably help if there were 4 villains. That kind of matchup would be fun because there would be 1-on-4 fights where someone like Daredevil has to take these guys on and he's super outmatched, but that forces all 4 of our heroes to come together so they can stand a chance against these 4 villains. And I guess ideally you would want someone from the comics, someone that's fought the Defenders in the past, maybe even ideally a team of villains whose first appearance was in a Defenders comic, and one that probably won't make it into the movies, although maybe they'd fit into one of the Disney Plus shows, but at this point in history those didn't exist. And wouldn't you know it, there is such a group of villains, and they have not been in any movie or MCU connected TV show to this point. And there are 4 of them. They are known as the Wrecking Crew. So for a really basic introduction, I would change a little bit of this origin story so that they have more of an interesting ideological difference between the Defenders. The Wrecking Crew are led by a character named the Wrecker. His real name is Dirk Garthwaite. He has an indestructible crowbar that he stole from Loki. He uses it to fight Thor, and originally he was a solo act, but he shares his power with 3 fellow inmates named Dr. Elliot Franklin, Brian Koleski, and Henry Camp, and the 4 of them together are known as the Wrecking Crew. They all have some form of super strength and invulnerability. Like I said, Dirk, also known as the Wrecker, has an indestructible magic crowbar that functions kind of like Thor's hammer, although not exactly the same way. Dr. Elliot Franklin is known as Thunderball. He is super strong and has a wrecking ball on a chain that he tosses around. He's awesome, one of my favorite character designs in comics. Koleski is known as Pile Driver. He has big fists and he can punch real good. And then you've got Henry Camp, who is the Bulldozer, who is essentially a weaker Juggernaut. They rob banks, they are on the Masters of Evil frequently, and they fight guys like Spider-Man and the Defenders. They show up a lot on the cartoons, but they've never been in any of the live-action movies so far. I think there's a good chance we'll see them in one of the Disney Plus shows. I think they'd be really good antagonists for She-Hulk specifically, but I really think they would have been perfect for the Defenders. And I want to talk you through how I would have introduced them.